Okay. So your second step is going to be, what do you do when you go out looking for a deal? Going through like, how do you find properties? How do you find contractors? How do you run numbers? What do you look for in a property? We'll actually look through a video and I'll point out the things that you look for when you're looking to either flip a property or rent a property out. We'll go through those steps, and then we'll also look at real numbers and see how you run numbers, see how you look for comps in the area, making sure that you get a good deal. That's all part two, which is going to be Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And then part three is literally just a panel of folks on here. So I'll have a few of my friends that are also investors, and one strictly does vacation homes, and his investment strategy is completely different than mine, and it's fine, it works for him. And then there's a couple of us who are into like rehabs or buy and hold. Buy and hold means you buy it, you hold it typically for renting, or buy and flip is obviously you rehab it and offload it. So there's two of us that do those, and then there's another multifamily investor, and then there's one other investor who specializes in something called subject to, which is how you buy property with essentially no money down and no official debt tied to you. And she'll go over that on, that's part three. We haven't scheduled a date for that. It will likely be Thursday of next week at 7 o'clock, but I will let everyone know. All right, so first, I want to say, just with the recent events, rest in peace to George Floyd. I think this is a huge reminder that it's important for us to buy property, especially to take a larger stakehold in our community, and also, that turns into governing our own community. So that's a huge piece of why I do what I do, not just for the money, but also because I believe in that we should be taking a stronger ownership into our community. All right, I already went over the agenda. I told you as a chat feature is off. You can click on the bottom piece of your screen. It says chat, and then it pops over to your right side that has the agenda. You guys can also ask questions there, and I'll get to those then. All right, so quick bio. I was essentially a single mom. I wanted to increase my income. It was just at the point where I just wanted to have supplemental income, and so I started talking to folks who were, I guess, wealthy in the area and asking them what they did to, get their money. And the common trend was folks had some kind of ties to real estate. And so I knew that I needed to do that as well. So when I was 19, I purchased my first property, and I did very slow investing. I didn't have anyone like I'm doing now to tell me the steps that you should take. I didn't know the tax ramifications from things. I didn't know any of that stuff. But hopefully that you'll take some of these little nuggets that I've given you away, and you guys can invest more quickly if that's what your aim. So anyways, I invested slowly. What I mean by slowly is I used my own money to invest. I didn't leverage any debt. And we'll go over why that's not really the best idea to do if you're trying to invest aggressively. And also the market I was in was not a super fast market. I was in Omaha, Nebraska. It wasn't very, it's picked up a lot now, but it wasn't a fast market there then. I was not a licensed realtor for about 10 years, only about 8 years into it. So you don't have to be licensed, and we'll go over the details on the benefits of being licensed and not licensed when you're investing. And I personally I start businesses and I purchase businesses in order to feel real estate, but we'll go into that detail later. All right. So also, I am going to say that I'm very transparent with numbers as far as my income or what the deals actually cost to get in and get out of. And what you're going to find is when you are getting into a huge complaint that you hear that investors will talk amongst themselves about, are that new investors are not transparent with their numbers. For some reason, people like to be hush-hush about their income, and that's really no way for you to move quickly or even move about in real estate, because it's a pretty fast-moving business. So when you are interested in investing, you need to be transparent. So say I have $3,000 to invest, I have $5,000, $20,000, whatever. just be transparent with it, because no one really wants to help, honestly, in the business. People are moving and shaking to get to their own personal goals, but they will sometimes slow down in order to help you real quickly. But if you're not being transparent, it's hard to help move things along. I will say that we have to set our expectations, because HGTV and DIY Network and all these other TV shows and media makes it look like real estate is a very easy and quick way to come up on money. It is somewhat quick, but it's not exactly easy. And I know that if you guys are on my Facebook page, I typically post when I have achievements, but there's many days that I get turned down for a deal. I don't lose a deal. Like I lost a deal last week. The things happen all the time. You can't let that get you down or whatever, kill your spirit. You just have to keep going, because that's just part of the game. All right. So now, like I said, this first portion, we're going to really just talk about ways to get your mentality shifted, and the practical things you need to do before you start looking for a house. So the first thing you need to do when you're just brand new, you're like wet behind the ears, and you're saying like, I want to go ahead and invest in real estate. What do I need to do? Your first thing that you need to do is determine your goal, and be blunt with your goal. Some folks, it's completely monetary. Some it is just doing good in the world, or whatever the case would be. So an example of a couple of different polar opposite goals would be, one person may have a goal of they want to have a high net worth. Okay, that's going to be a completely different goal than saying you want to have large cash flows. For me, I want cash flow. I don't care about the net worth. I want high cash flow. So my investment strategy is going to be different than someone who wants to have a high net worth in 10, 15 years. Okay, so another goal may be you just want to have supplemental income. You love your job. You don't want to leave your job. So you know that you can't be full on into real estate because you need to have time to do your normal job. So you've got to set a realistic goal. And once you set up a realistic goal, then you can go on to strategy. Your strategy has to directly correlate to your goal. So for example, if your goal is to, I'll just use my goal. My goal was to have large cash flow. Well, then I needed to make sure that back up. My first goal was a slow approach. I just wanted to have a supplemental income. At some point, it moved to being aggressive and said, no, now I just want to have a lot of money. So I had to be more aggressive with my approach. And what I mean by aggressive is your focus on your real estate is going to change. It can be flipping, it can be buying and holding. The smart way to do is to have your portfolio split, because you're balancing your risk and balancing your income. And if there's things that I'm saying that don't make sense, please make sure you type it, or you can just talk on the Zoom. But you need to see how you want to the strategy you want. So a good example is to have some goals. The goal marker is going to move, but if you say, hey, I want to make $15,000 a month, if you want to start with that goal, then you will need to look at how you can get to that. So it might say, I need to buy 10 properties. I need to buy a multifamily property. And you determine that the multifamily property is going to cost you $1.5 million. Well, then we'll talk about this later, how you get loans, but you're typically going to need to put down 30% of your 30% of the purchase price. So then that you're going to need $400,000 or so. So if that's the case, and you say, well, I only have $10,000, then you know that you need to flip houses to build capital. That's one way. Or you need to find a partnership, but we'll go into that a little bit later in this bill. All right, so I have down here that, I have down also your aggressive approach. It will also, you need to look at single families, duplexes, your Airbnbs. So there's all different ways to make money in real estate. And I'm going to go into it later on how you build your capital to get into real estate, but we're just going to go on some of the mentality shifts and acceptance and such. So the first one is you have to be patient. A huge fatal mistake that new investors make is they want to get into a property very, they just want to get into a property, and so they look thirsty. Investors will call it that you look aggressive, and that's not all. It's not a good look, because sellers know this, and that's when you get taken advantage of. And it happens a lot. Like, I was at a property that was taken away from the investor because they couldn't perform, which means they didn't have enough money to continue with their flip, because they paid almost $20,000 more for the property than they should have, because they were just hungry and they did not run their numbers correctly. So that's a fatal mistake, that you've got to make sure that you're patient and that you'll let some deals pass. If the numbers don't make sense, you don't do it. Okay. Also, once you get into it, these are just things that you need to just note take on. Once you get into real estate, especially when you get into flipping, you need to make sure that you have a really good CPA, because there's a lot of tax considerations that you need to take advantage of. Your CPA should meet with you quarterly, because if you flip a couple of houses and your income is going to be $80,000, no tax, it's not taxed on yet, then that means you're going to have income that you need to expend, and that happens a lot in real estate. So your CPA can tell you how to expend money, which may be to get yourself into a property and not rehab it, or not sell it. You can rehab but not sell it until the next year. So those are just some things you need to look into. Make sure that you're balancing your profit margins correctly. All right. So with anything in real estate, or anything period, there's risk involved. So the risk involved with real estate, depending on what you do, is always that the property will not perform, or you can't perform. Performs means you buy a property to rent out and it doesn't rent out. You've got to make sure that you're looking at looking at everything in the property, looking at comps, and making sure there are rents in the area. You just got to make sure you do your due diligence on the properties. So that's one. Making sure that the property is rentable. Flipping, got to make sure that your purchase price and your rehab price are well below your resale price. And just like I said before, HGTV sometimes makes people feel like they're going to, spend $150,000 total on a house and make $200,000. That's not typically how it goes. The average is about $30,000 to $40,000, but it can go up as high as 100, but it's very unlikely. Let's see. So also with real estate, it's a huge responsibility. You've got to make sure you've got your insurance in place and have all these things in place before you go looking for a property. Of course, with insurance, you're not going to be able to pay for insurance until you have a property, but you want to make sure that you find an insurance broker who is comfortable with doing vacant houses, all those kinds of things, because you don't want to get to the table to close and you're searching for insurance, because you at some point the seller may move on without you, because it's very quick. When you're into the flips, when you buy your primary house, you could take 1 to 2 months to close. In a flip situation, you can make a offer on Tuesday and they might want you to close on Friday. So it's very quick. So you have to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row before you really start for property. Now for rental property and using a traditional way to fund it, which, a traditional loan, then the closing times are a little bit different. All right, so capital. A lot of questions that I get is, how do you invest when you don't have money? Well,
can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What did you mean by insurance broker? Like, that's another term.
Just make sure that you have an insurance company that's okay with vacant properties, but it's best to have an actual broker, someone who works for multiple insurance agencies, because one place may turn you down. And so you can just go back to your broker and, well, your broker will do all this for you. He should be figuring out where's the best, where your dollar's best spent at for that type of property. So, and so you would want to find a broker who's pretty experienced in investment properties and whatever realm you go into. So if you're going into flips, you need to make sure that your insurance broker is experienced with flips, because he should have a whole Rolodex of people who are, or insurance companies that are okay with flips, because not every insurance company is going to be okay with that. Or if you're if you're renting it out, some insurance companies may have a contingency in the area, you know, that says, okay, the place is going to be vacant for 90 days and then, you know, whatever. So you need to make sure your insurance broker is on top of those things. All right, so is that good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so for capital, so the question is, how do you start investing in real estate when you have no money? I'll start with that, no money. Well, the simple answer is you can't. You have to have some type of money to invest in, to invest. However, there are ways that you can source the money. So that would either be doing a joint venture with someone, and those joint ventures can be organic, or they can be organic, meaning you know someone who's a friend who you decide to just, you know, go into business with. And that's a whole different conversation, because you need to definitely meet with someone that you trust with. And I see a lot of things on Facebook, people are like, oh, let's join in and go together on a house. And that's like not a smart idea, because there's so many aspects of it other than just saying, hey, you have 50, I have 50, let's buy $100,000 property. Because if you exhaust all your resources, you need to have money for maintenance fees, because you can buy a property, rent it out, and then the same month you've got, you know, HVAC system goes out or electrical goes out, and that could be up to $8,000, and now you guys got to split it, but the other person doesn't have money. So there's a lot of things you have to look into when you go to joint ventures, essentially. Or you can do a more formal joint venture, which even an organic joint venture should have some kind of formality into it. But a formal a joint venture is when you've got a real estate broker or a kind of like a wholesaler, and we'll talk about wholesaling later, who says, hey, it's usually multifamily properties. They'll say, hey, we've got a 178 door apartment building, and we are looking for 5 other members to join our team. And you have to bring in some kind of capital into it, or in very rare cases, you can bring in a skill. And those are usually for apartment complexes or properties that need a lot of work onto them. So they might say, this apartment complex cost $1 million, and we have 5 members who are bringing, you know, whatever they're splitting the sell price on it, but we need another member to come in to do labor for free, and they can get a share of the apartment. So that's one way to get into a property without putting money down, but that's, you know, doesn't happen often, and it's you know, so that's it. The other way to get into without money is wholesaling. And on part 3, the person who's talking about the subject 2, she'll kind of speak on wholesaling as well, but or I can have someone else actually come speak on wholesaling too. Think about that. So just now, but anyways, wholesaling is when you essentially you find a property that is, you approach a house, or the house is not in the market. The house is not in the market. It's not for sale. And the person may be going through a foreclosure, at the very early signs of a foreclosure, or there's a lot of different ways to do it. Sometimes people do unethical things, like someone dies and they see, oh, this person was 90 years old and the husband died a year before, so we know that this person's going to want to offload the family might want to offload the property. So they'll approach the family and say, hey, do you want to sell this house? Because I noticed there's, it might be a mortgage on it for whatever amount. And they approach the person and say, I can get this house sold for $60,000. And they're like, great, let's sell the house for $60,000. And then the wholesaler would turn around and put the house on off market, not on market. We'll put it on the off market and say, this house is worth $80,000, or this house is going for sale for $80,000. Well, the buyer doesn't know that it really was only 60,000. So they pay 80 and the wholesaler takes 20 and the sellers take 60. It typically happens during a foreclosure process. You would have to know how your county and your government record those. I just talked with someone that explained how they do it in Texas, but in Nebraska, they record it in the county that that the proceeding is about to happen. And so then you would reach out, you would look in basically the county record and say, oh, this house is, the bank has just scheduled a hearing basically for the foreclosure. And so if you're a wholesaler, you would look through these county records, and then you would go knock on the door. And this is like huge business. Like there's thousands of wholesalers that do this, but you have to be the very first one to approach the family, or the one that has the best deal. So you approach the family and say, hey, I saw that your house is about to go through foreclosure. How much do you owe on the house? And they'll say, I owe $100,000 on the house. And the wholesaler will say, okay, well, I will just buy, I'll pay we'll get this sold for you in a couple of weeks for $100,000. That way you don't have to get a foreclosure on your record, and it's all good. Then that wholesaler goes and says, hey, this house is $130,000, and they sell it that way. So then that's a way for you to source money. And now you have $30,000 that you can now go invest in another property. A lot of investors will suggest that you do that because you get to learn the market without putting any money into it with your wholesaling. So that's one way you can actually get into real estate without it. Of course, you can pull out money out your 401k, you can use your tax returns, you can do all those kinds of things. But essentially, once you have a good down payment, which is 30% of the purchase cost, or the ARV. The ARV is the after repair value. So two different ways. So when you go for a loan, the loan is typically the way people acquire property. Most people investors do not use their own money, and I don't suggest that you use your own money. You should always try and get someone else's money. The best way I feel to purchase real estate is to use a private money lender or a hard money lender. Private money is the best money. Hard money is an easy way to do it, but hard money has a higher interest rate. Okay. Private money, hard money, and regular and traditional loans will always require you to put down 30%, typically 30%. Sometimes you can find 20, but most of the time it's 30% down of the after repair value. Private money and hard money typically only lend for properties that need repair. You wouldn't want to use it for a buy and hold situation because the interest rate's so high. That's like 12%. The reason why you use private or hard money is because you can close really quickly. Now, private money is, an investor, and they're out here. These people have money and they don't want to do the work of flipping. They just want to give you the money. So you can go to real estate meetings and talk with people, and they'll say, I'm a private money lender. Throw me a deal. I'll give you the money for it. I only want 6%. That's a private money lender. A hard money lender is usually like an institution, and what they do is, anyone can do this. Even any of you can do this. If you got money and you just want to make money off of it, you throw money into a hard money pool, and they they pretty much source all the money from investors, and typically they've got like $4 or $5 million or more to lend, typically more, and they will lend off the after repair value. So for example, the purchase price is 50 and it costs 50 to rehab. So that means the whole purchase and repair price is $100,000. So you need $100,000 to rehab the property if you're paying in cash. But the after repair value of the house is 175. Those are real numbers. 175,000. So actually, if it's something like that, it would end up being closer to $150,000. So then that means that the hard money lender will give you a loan of 70% of that, which is 105,000. So that means that you essentially don't have to put any money down on the house because they're giving you $105,000 for the purchase and rehab, which means that you darn sure better make sure that you calculated your rehabs correctly and that you purchased the property at market value or at below market value, because that's the mistake that people make, is that they underestimate their repairs and their repairs end up being 75 instead of 50. Or, you know, you've got to cushion yourself too, because there could be a lot more issues once you open the house up and open the walls up. And then now you've got, you know, $20,000 that you need to find. And that's when people end up selling the house again off market to try and get another investor to come and fix up what they've already started. So you want to make sure that you do your calculations correctly. So that's the best way to do it without money, is to find a property that the numbers work so you don't have to put any money down. That typically, that happens sometimes, you know, 40% of the time. It's not like unheard of for it to happen. But typically you're gonna have to put down around 10 to 20%. And depending on the hard money lender, they sometimes will want you to put money down even if the numbers show that you don't, so you can have skin in the game basically, because these loans are pretty much unsecured other than they get the property back. Oh, and that's another thing. Private money and hard money, they don't typically pull your credit. It's usually on the deal. Some hard money lenders who are a little bit tighter with their restrictions and such, they will pull your credit, or they'll ask you. Most of the time, the lenders will ask you for your credit karma report, which is interesting. But they ask for your credit karma report, and they just want to make sure that you know, can pay that you're actually paying on time on things. Some hard money lenders that have better rates will give you better rates the more flips that you do and the more real estate that you own, because it shows that you can perform. But there's lots that just that lend on the deal. So I hope that you take away from that is that you need to make sure that you purchase low and that your rehab costs are accurate. But the best way to do it is that your 70% that they will lend fits all into the purchase and rehab costs. Does that make sense? All right, and then also how it works is they don't just give you the full rehab cost. You have to create a schedule. So what you would say is, okay, the first week of June, I'm gonna work on exterior, you know, siding, roofing, windows. And you can also say simultaneously, I'm going to rip up the floors, put new floors down, do the drywall, and paint. And then they'll say, okay, take pictures of it, or they might send someone out to verify that you did those things. Then they'll disperse the money. Or sometimes they disperse it before, but typically they disperse it afterwards. So it depends. It depends on how they set it up. If you don't have any money set aside, they might disperse it before, but typically you do need to put money up before. So I forgot to say that earlier. So typically if it's, your drywall and all that kind of stuff, to say it's $10,000. That the hard money guy may require you to pay the contractors the $10,000, or at least the $5,000 just to get the contractor started, and they pay you on the back end. Just, I hope that makes sense. Okay. Let's see. So I'm trying to make sure I'm answering everyone's questions that they've sent earlier. So credit score. Okay, when credit score actually does matter, it's when you buy and hold. Oh, yeah. The private money and the hard money, they are very short-term loans, 6 months to 12 months, because these are fix it and get out of them. Okay, you always need to have an exit plan when you're using private money and hard money. It is you're going to sell it, and if you can't sell it, you need to get a traditional mortgage loan on that. That's when your credit score does matter, because you're going to go to a regular bank and ask for a loan. And the regular bank is 70% as well, so you'll be fine. 70%, you'll be fine, because typically they want that 70%. They want 30% equity in the property before they loan on it.
I have a question.
Sure.
For individuals with VA loans, how would that fit in?
Okay, excellent question. Who is this, by the way?
This is Brandon Merrill.
Okay, hi. All right, so a VA loan and FHA loan, they're both government-backed loans. VA, guys, is for veterans, and FHA is for pretty much like anyone, essentially. You can get a loan for an investment property using VA and FHA if you live in it. So you could buy a duplex, a threeplex, a triplex, or a fourplex. The best thing to do is get a fourplex and live in one of those units. I can't remember what the VA's limitations are. You have to live in it, I don't know, like 1 to 3 years. I don't remember what the statute on that is, or the regulation on that is. You have to look that up. But you can just Google it. But you have to live in it for some period of time. I don't remember what it is. But yeah, you can live in it some period of time. So, but anyways, you can get a fourplex and rent the other 3 out, which is a really smart idea. You can't go above a fourplex on any government-backed loan. Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. And also, VA won't do like a rehab loan. Well, they do, but not to the same extent as you would want for a flip. Yeah, that's it. All right, make sure I got all this stuff in here. So yeah, so you can include the rehab cost, boom, 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 credit score, went through that, perfect. All right. All right, so we talked about how we can use loans to acquire property. We talked about how, and also, just so you guys know, when you use hard money and private money, you need to have cash set aside for their appraisal. For anything less than a 4-unit, it's a residential appraisal, which they cost like between $1,000 and $1,500 typically. If you go above a 4-unit, your appraisal is going to be around, depending on how large it is, $3,000 to $5,000 for the appraisal fee. So make sure you have that set aside, and then always, of course, make sure you cushion your capital with maintenance and all that kind of stuff. Oh, and also people ask, how much they need to have set aside for if they want to rent the property out. So keep your maintenance, keep your legal fees, and keep your property management fees, locked away for yourself. You don't have to always use a property manager when you have rental property, but it's a good idea because they keep in touch with all the legalness of the property and kind of hands off. Okay. Does anyone have questions on how to purchase a residential property? It's we're not going through the process, sorry, but leading up to it, what things you need to do to get ready for that. Oh, I didn't go into that. You need to form yourself an LLC. When you buy single family property and up to 4-unit, that's another thing. When you buy property using VA or FHA, you can't put it into an LLC. So you cannot waive your liability. If someone slips and falls and they want to sue you, they can sue you. So that's something that you need to look at. The advantage to using FHA and VA is that you don't have to put a lot of money down on the property, but you don't get to waive your liability. An LLC is a way, and I'll explain it. An LLC, you should put each property in its own separate LLC, because if someone someone falls or does something, they want to sue you, they can't sue you, they have to sue the property, because it's essentially an LLC, it's a business. They sue your business, they sue your LLC. And it's a limited liability. So it's just that business. They can't go and take all your property. If you lose and the judge awards the tenant or whoever sues you, then they can take that LLC, not anything else. Worst case scenario, that's what you do. But also, it's a good idea if you're looking to get into being a landlord, is that you have umbrella insurance, because it covers you up typically to however much you want, and it's really cheap. So I would definitely get umbrella insurance.
I don't know. Are you going to bring up? You mentioned earlier about the rehab loans. Is that going to be another discussion later?
So the rehab loan was that private money and hard money deal. So it's all combined into one loan. So if you find a house for, like, the one that we're going to look at and go through on Tuesday, the numbers are 75,000. They want 77,000 for it, but the rehab is 50. So so we're at 127,000, and the after repair value on that property is 180. So the banks will loan you, what is that? 126, I think. Shoot, hold up. Sorry, hold on. The hard money lender will loan you $122,000 for that property if you were to use a hard money lender for it, because that includes the purchase price and the rehab cost. Let's see if that includes all of that. Didn't run that number yet. Nope, it doesn't include everything. So you're gonna have to, it's like less than $5,000 you have to bring to the table on that. So that's how you lend that's how you fund a rehab property. You have to calculate the rehab. Oh, and we're gonna go into all this more, like actually get into numbers on part 2, because when you run numbers, you don't run exact numbers, because if you run exact numbers, it's going to take you a long time. You're going to lose the property, because these things get offloaded very quickly. So you just have to, and we'll go into like the process of actually like acquiring the deal in part 2, but just briefly is most investors, well, it depends on the property, but I either do one or two ways. I bring my contractor with me so he can actually see, put eyes on the property and can quickly give me a number, like right then and there, this is going to cost you boom, boom, boom. Or I take pictures or a video of it, and then I get a number within an hour, because you can't go and measure things and you just can't do all that. Well, one, they don't really usually allow that if there's tenants in there, and two, it's just, it's be a waste of time to do that, because you might not get the property. So it's real quick. So I just say, okay, it's going to cost $50,000. I add another $10,000 for cushion, and the property costs 50. All right, so we're $10,000 into it. You have to run your numbers really quickly like that. And something that's 110 probably sell for about 170. So then you're going to say, okay, so in order for me to close on this with the hard money lender and private money lender to pay for the rehab, the total will be 119. That's 70%, or 70% of the cost. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And it's always 70% of the after repair value, the ARV. It's always 70% of ARV. And when you buy I don't know if people are more interested in buying properties to rehab or properties that are ready to go. I mean, your biggest value is going to be with property that need to get rehab. But if you're more like, I just want to buy a turnkey property, then it's going to be 70% of the loan. So, or sorry, 70% of the purchase price. So if the property is going to cost you $100,000 for a turnkey property, then the banks will loan you $70,000. So you'll have to come up with $30,000 if you're not using FHA or VA. And make sure that if you're using FHA or VA, that you're living in one of the units of the property. Okay. And there's other deals too with well, the vacation. There's other things you can use FHA, VA, or you can use VA if you want to purchase a second home, but you have to stay in it a certain amount of times, and there's a lot of different deals on that. If you're interested in that, you can shoot me an email or whatever, and I'll explain it more. But I don't think most people are in that wheelhouse. All right. Okay. So another thing too. Mentality shift before you go into the property is to understand debt is an excellent tool. You will not if your goal is to essentially become a millionaire, you will not get there if you don't use debt. You have to leverage debt. I'm not saying leverage your properties, your other properties for other deals. You should leverage the property that it's tied to, the deal's tied to secure loans, whatever. So the reason why debt's good is because if you have $100,000 and you go spend $100,000 on one property, then you have spent 3 to 4 months on the rehab and the sale, and you've tied up $100,000. You shouldn't do that. So instead, what you should do is you have $100,000 and you split that up, say $20,000 per property. So now you've got 4 to 5 properties that you can flip at once because you went and got 5 different loans from the hard money lender. And that way, instead of just turning a profit of $40,000, now you're turning a profit of 40,000 times 5. So now you've just made $200,000 in just 3 to 4 months. That's what you want to do. That's why debt is important. But again, know that it comes with a risk. You could not sell one of the properties and you're just paying the loan. Brings me to another point. Hard money and private money, you don't pay principal. So the principal does not go down the entire life of that loan. Your entire payment goes to interest. And that's why people invest their money into hard money, because they get a high return because nothing goes to principal. And if you're interested in just investing, investing with the hard money lender is also a good idea if you want to make money off of real estate, but you don't want to do the work. But just know that you need to spread your money around on different deals and not tie your money up in one deal. And then once you get into flipping properties and you're turning profit, you need to, like we talked about earlier in your goals and strategies, you need to balance your portfolio. Not all of your income should come from flips, and not all of your income should come from residential. You need to balance it. Okay. Oh, another thing is someone asked about partners. I am an advocate of having a partner that's organic and not something that's like put together. Unless is if it is professionally managed joint venture. And I mean, there are companies that out here that will professionally manage a joint venture, or sometimes it's an investor who will step in and say, I will manage your joint venture for, an admin fee, essentially. And what they do is they say, hey, I've got a property that's $150,000 and I will lend the entire money for this, or 70% of the money, and you guys need to come up with the 30%. So, so in this instance, this is an easy way to get into real estate as well. So the investor will say, you guys need to come up with $45,000. So maybe 3 of you want to go in on a property, and you guys all just put in $15,000 on a property. So then you guys may return $70,000, and you're going to split it 3 ways, and so you guys would make $23,000, and plus the investor would take out his fee, which is typically going to be like $3,000 per individual or so, depending on the deal. A deal of that size would probably be $3,000 each individual. So then investor would take out $3,000 out of each person's share. So instead of making 23, you would make 20 on the deal. And when you do those kinds of things, you want to make sure that you're working with an investor who's experienced and someone that you can trust. But just, and when you get into, and that's just one way, when you get into more partnerships and it's organic, you should make sure that your partner is like kind of like almost opposite of you and thinks differently. I've worked pretty much my entire time without a real estate wise without a partner, and I just recently buddied up with the partner, and we think very opposite, which is great when you're dealing with real estate, because that person will see things that you don't, or also it keeps you balanced and not like taking unneeded risk. All right. Okay. Another question is, do you need a real estate license? Oh, sorry. So I just saw one here. Should you wait until you have your own home first as a single mom? Okay. So no, actually, it's better to not own your own home when you get into real estate, because when you go in to finance if you want to have stable income and you decide to keep your property, like say you buy a fourplex and you fix it up and you're like, okay, I want to keep it. Or if you just do want to do a turnkey property, like I don't want to fix property up, I just want to buy them and rent them out, which is fine. You know, it's an excellent strategy as well. Then the banks are going to look at your debt to income ratio. They're going to add up how much all of your monthly debt is, and then how much your income is. Now they'll look, and so when you go in for the investment property, they're going to add, I believe the equation is 70% of the income. The reason why they look at 70% is because they know that not all of your income that you make, your gross income that you make on your property is actually profit. Some of it goes to real estate taxes, some of it goes to income taxes, and some of it goes to maintenance or property management. So the rule is usually 70% of your gross rental income they look at as income. They qualify as income. So you don't want to have too high debt ratio, because then you can't get your property into permanent financing. And some hard money lenders will look at your debt to income ratio as well. And some will charge you higher interest rate if they do think you're a risk, or some just might say no. How do you find a hard money lender? Okay, good question. So a lot of these things you're going to need to go to networking events. And I know it sounds like so annoying to say that, but really these people are like sharks. They are at networking events because they have what hard money, how it's set up is, you got, let's just say 5 people that have, and you don't have to be a millionaire to be a hard money lender. You might have inherited $100,000 from someone's whatever insurance, or someone's life insurance, and you're like, where should I invest it at? So you go give it to you go give your money to a hard money lender. Usually hard money lenders have different pots. They have money from an investor that says, I want 10% or I want 8% return on my money, or I want 10% return on my money. Well, the hard money lenders will say, well, we need to make our cut, so that's 8%, we're gonna make it 10%, and then this 10% or make it 12%. So they have all this money. Let's just say they've got, just for the sake of making it easy, they have 5 investors that decide to put $1 million each into the pot. Now they have $5 million. These investors want their return like now. So these hard money guys are like sharks. They want you to use them to use, for your investment property. So they will be on they'll be at events, they'll be at on Facebook, but you don't get got by these people either. Like, don't get got by them. So typically you don't want to pay any fees to the hard money people. Or first off, so you won't get got, you don't pay hard money people 30%. So example, if the property is $100,000, okay, if you end up having to owe the hard money guys, whatever X percent of a deal, you don't pay it to the hard money people, you pay it to title, okay? So most hard money will say you can choose whatever title company you want. Some may want to use their own. I think it's better when you find a hard money lender that lets you use any title, because it lets you know they're not in control of the money. Does that make sense? If it doesn't, make sure that you say something. Okay, so I think I answered all the questions over there in the chat. Let me go back over on the other side that people have asked questions. Okay, so you don't need to be a licensed realtor in order to invest in property. I wasn't for about 8 years, and I actually never used my license to acquire property. Okay. The reason why it's good to have a licensed realtor, first off, if you use a realtor, make sure that they are versed on investing, because a regular realtor is going to do no good for you. I literally have used regular realtors just because I needed them to get the deal closed when the properties were on the market. Oh, okay. Let me write that down so I don't forget to say that. Were on market and they were just like, ew, gross, this house sucks, you shouldn't get it. They're not interested. They're not versed in rehab. So you need to find someone who's a licensed realtor, if you want to use a realtor that understands flips, rentals, all that kind of thing. All right. The reason why you might not want to use a realtor, and I'm not steering anyone either way, I don't like using realtors because I don't want to pay the commission. And if I do use a realtor, then I'm going to negotiate with him or her and say, I want half the commission back, which you can do that, and make sure that you do that, because well, I won't say make sure they do that. If you are a pretty if you're able to find your own deals, then you don't need to pay a realtor all their fees. So make sure that you negotiate that if you're pretty on top of your stuff. Okay, that brings me to the next thing. On and off market properties. You are not going to find the best deal by searching the MLS, typically. There's exceptions to that. But typically, you're not going to find the best deal by going on Zillow or using a realtor to go through the MLS. That's why also the realtor is kind of useless too, because unless they're investing and they're okay with doing off the market property, you're going to find the best deals by looking at off the market property. There's no system that holds off market properties. There's no system that holds off the market properties. MLS, Zillow, and all those things are for on-market properties. Okay? Off-the-market property are things that a wholesaler found or an investor is offloading. You have to network to find those. There are entire agencies that are wholesalers that all they do is wholesale and offload properties. That's not a heavily advertised thing, so you have to really go to those networking events to find who the wholesalers are. Now, there are some areas that don't do a lot of wholesaling, like Omaha doesn't do a lot of wholesaling. A lot of Omaha's deals are either on the MLS or they're all off-market private deals. So you kind of got to get to know the investors, and they may say, hey, I want to offload this property. That's kind of how things work. Okay, and then the other thing is you need to decide on which type of property do you want. Do you want, it's called Class A, B, and C. I think there's D too. A Class A property, of course, is like your upscale property. And this aligns to your strategy and also your risk level and also what you want to deal with. A Class A, it's going to be higher cost, higher rents, which means your risk is higher because if you don't rent it out, then you've got a higher debt to pay. Okay, B is kind of like in the middle. C is where I like to live. I like to live in C for so many reasons, because when the economy falls, people in the C units, they are able to continue to pay rent because that's just how our economy is set up. And also C units are a little bit less expensive. So for example, a Class A, if you want to buy a 20-unit apartment complex, you're going to pay maybe $3 million, $4 million. Class B, you're going to pay around $2 million, and Class C, you're going to pay around $1, $1.5 million for a 20-unit multifamily. Okay. I've got questions. Let me get to questions. Oh, also, when you're crunching numbers, we'll go into this tomorrow, but make sure that you understand what your return on investment is going to be. That's how much profit you're going to make. How much profit you're going to make if you're going to flip, and how much profit you're going to make when you rent it out if you decide to rent it out. Okay. So I answered how to find a money lender. Okay. Is there anything else you should watch out for with hard money lenders? Okay, so when you're dealing with the hard money lender, you want to watch out for any like crazy fees that they have. So the average fees that you'll have associated with the property when you're dealing with the hard money lender, or any lender at this is or any lender, is an appraisal fee. They're always gonna have an appraisal fee. It's fine if you pay it because you know you're gonna get the appraisal back. The other fee is a repair inspection. So some hard money lenders will do a repair inspections to make sure that you didn't lowball a repair, and then they're stuck with you not being able to afford it. So they'll go in and make sure that the repair in fact costs $50,000 and not $75,000. And the other fees are title fees and all the other legal fees. Because sellers in this market, especially if you do an off-market property, they're not going to pay any seller fees. If you do an on-market property, sometimes you can get sellers to pay some of the fees sometimes. Yeah, okay. I have a fix and flip. I'm about to get under contract. How do I present the numbers to make it attractive to the investors? Okay, can you explain when you say I have a flip, what investors? The investors on your team? Or are you selling this fix and flip? Can you explain that more? You can unmute your mic and just say it.
Yes. Currently, I'm trying to decide. This will be my first investment property, and I'm trying to decide if I want to keep it or if I want to fix it and flip it. But I'm probably going to need a hard money lender to actually finance the property if I decide to keep the property.
Okay, so when you say present the numbers, you mean present it to the hard money lender?
Yes.
Okay, so when you present the numbers to the hard money lender, I wouldn't necessarily say, well, here's the thing. You don't want to make the numbers look attractive to a hard money lender. You want them to actually be realistic, because the hard money lenders, they're not in it to soak up risk. So that kind of protects you too, because you don't want to soak up unneeded risk either. And since they're professionals at evaluating risk, it kind of is a good way to make sure you're not getting into something that's not great, right? So, or not going to make you money, a lot of money in return. So, regardless, you're gonna make you need to, before you take on a deal, you need to make sure that the rehab and purchase price are going to keep you under or at or under 70%, because you need an exit strategy. Rather that be sell it because you want to make at least 30%, or the deal is not even worth it if you're not making 30% on a flip. Or you need to make sure that you're staying under 70% because you need to exit out and get traditional loan from a bank. You can't just hold on to hard money, because it's kind of like use it for a few months and be done with it. Okay, does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, you mentioned ensuring that each property was its own LLC. Okay, LLCs are super easy to do. It's literally a template that you fill out, and especially you're in Omaha, it's literally like 10 lines to create an LLC. It's all you need. You file it on the state website. Don't fall for these little things online that say we can file your LLC for $500, whatever the heck it is, because it literally costs like $100, something like that. It's really cheap to do it. So, and literally this year I probably filed about 15 LLCs. Like they're very easy, and it's just kind of like you just file them and whatever, because when you want to use them, you use them. And also make sure that you know in your state what the requirements are. For example, in Nebraska, I believe domestic LLCs file a financial statement on the odd number years, no, even number years. So make sure you check that. Now that I said that, I need to check and make sure it's not odd number. Yeah. Okay. What are examples for leveraging debt? Okay, a way to leverage debt. Well, it depends on who you talk to. The smartest way to leverage debt is if you have a property that you own free and clear, go ahead and leverage it and take out money off of it. You're going to be able to get 70% again off the property. You own a house that costs $100,000, you owe $0 on it, you can take out $70,000 on it. You owe a house that cost $150, you owe $70, then you could take out 70% of the equity. Another way to leverage debt is, well, this is actually a really complicated question because it gets into all types of things. So typically when you've got, like, if you're really deep into real estate investing, you're going to own a business, a separate business entity as well, because you need to balance your leveraging capabilities. But let's see. Oh, another thing is, well, how far into the question do you want to go? Leveraging debt to what extent?
So I've always been told, get out of debt, get rid of debt, no debt. So I guess I'm having a hard time grasping good debt.
Yeah.
So I guess I don't even know how deep it goes. So I guess I'm just like it boggles my mind that it's like, I've heard other millionaires say, well, no, you're supposed to leverage your debt, use debt. And I'm like, now I'm starting to get into it, and I'm like, how's that good? So
yeah, so it is I was brought up the same way, that debt's bad. You shouldn't have debt, and that's why I use my own money to purchase properties in the beginning. But debt is not a bad thing. It's actually a really good thing. I wish my business partner was on this call because he's really passionate about debt, and he's not. Okay, so debt.
You can table it if he's coming out later on the other parts, but I was just,
yeah,
that was like my biggest question.
Part two, but I can go on and say That's good for the example I gave earlier, because you can make a lot more money. First off, you can write debt off. So once you start making a certain amount of income on, this world was not set up for, millionaires were not made off of W-2 employees. They are made off of 1099, and it's because you can write off a lot. And you write off a lot by leveraging debt. So as soon as you pay off something, you want to go and get another debted property, because you want to have something to write off, if that makes sense. So, that's just one reason why debt's good. The other reason is you leverage it so you can exponentially make more money. Like I said earlier, you have $100,000, and if you put that $100,000 into one property, you're only going to make $40,000 in 3 to 4 months. While that sounds good, it's not going to make you a millionaire. What's going to get you to a millionaire in less than 2-3 years is if you take that $100,000 and you put 20 in 5 different places, and in 4 months, that makes you $200,000. So
Okay.
then you have then you have $300,000. You've got the 100 that you got back, and you have the 200 that you just made. So now you have $300,000. On that $300,000, you can then divide your $20,000 into 15 properties, because and this is like a lot. There's so much into it. But if you decide to go say, okay, I'm gonna do 15 properties, and the average amount that I'm gonna make is $40,000, now you've just made $600,000. So that's one way to do it. However, most folks that have $300,000, well, I won't say most, some people will put it in 15 houses, and that's just how they run. Or you would put that $300,000 into a multifamily that needs work, and multifamily or where it's at, because you put it into an apartment complex, you rehab, let's say a 30-unit complex, and you can gross anywhere between $500,000 and $700,000 just off of 300,000. So now instead of having your 300, you have 700, and you just hit the million mark in just a little over, just a year.
That makes sense. That last example makes sense. I'm writing it off, and you can split the money up in several different ways.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Split it up, and then debt is what, even just looking at what happened with coronavirus, and if you guys heard about the PPP loan, those made millionaires instantly with the, it's all debt. It's all tied to debt, and it's how you grow. Okay. I know a few investors who look for beat down homes and offer to buy them. Says one approached me to find properties for them. What is a good fee for myself? A good fee to find properties? Okay. For them to buy it. Well, so okay. What state are you in? Nicole M. Texas. Okay. Are you in Houston? All right, Dallas still. Don't do it for them for a fee. They're just trying to use you. And because what it is they're wanting you to be a wholesaler to them without really paying the wholesale price. If you're going to do that and you're going to look for a deal, you should become your own wholesaler, where you're finding the deal and you're marketing it. And all you have to do is just go to meetings and say, hey, I've got a deal for, X amount of money, and and you have to figure out the after repair value yourself, and say it approximately needs $50,000 of work, but it can sell for $200,000. And then you'll sell it. So then it's not a fee. You make $20,000 off of just buying one property. That's what you need to do. But a lot of investors try and like do this deal where they can like, I'll just pay you a fee or whatever. It doesn't work. The only way it really works is if they actually employ you, and that's how it works, but not just like a fee. Okay. Okay. Eric asked, how do you find a good a hard money lender? Well, it's actually kind of trial and error. And then also you can see how experienced an investor or a hard money lender is on how they perform during the deal. So here's the thing. Not all hard money lenders will perform. Some will, say, hey, I want to get this deal, and you spend a couple of days with them and they can't perform. So you really have to just it's really trial and error, honestly. And also if you speak with wholesalers, they usually know who can get the deal closed, what HML can get the deal closed. So it's a lot of the hard money is kind of trial and error. So are there any other questions? Like I said, on part 2, I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at, and we can look through how you actually go and find properties and how you find things that are off the market. And then we'll look at a video, do a walkthrough, see how we calculate numbers, go over what you need to look at when you're in a property, just to, the major pieces that you look at to make sure that you're running your numbers correctly, and just kind of the whole entire process from let's find one, let's see how much it's going to cost, let's get the financing in place, and then your exit strategy. We'll go through all that. Are there any questions?
So I do have a question. You mentioned hard money lender the whole entire time. I mean, is there not another avenue like the traditional loan versus the private or traditional the same as hard money?
No, traditional is not the same as hard money. So when you're dealing with the MLS, typically you can use a traditional loan source kind of. If it needs like a lot of rehab, then a traditional loan source isn't going to do the trick, because they want to see that the major pieces of a house are still there, like plumbing's there, blah, blah, blah. They're going to want to do an inspection. And a lot of times if you're doing a rehab, these things can't pass an inspection. The seller is not interested in fixing it. If you decide to buy one just for a rental property, you can 100% use a traditional lender. And 70% for a traditional lender. That's like going to Bank of America or Bank of the West, wherever you want to go and get that loan. If you're looking to rehab a property, you need to look for hard money. The reason why, these sellers, they're most of the time going to be off the market. If you're trying to flip, you typically aren't going to find a great deal on MLS. Now it happens sometimes, but majority are moved when a lot of these properties are moved when they're off the market. They're off the market properties, and these sellers, the wholesalers, they're not gonna wait a month or a month and a half or however long a bank's gonna take, because a bank has to do the appraisal, the inspection, all the paperwork. That it takes entirely too long. Typically, these people will put a house on market Monday. The first question is, how fast can you close? And honestly, how fast can you close is a bargaining piece, because you may have a property. Let's say the one I'm going to show you tomorrow on Tuesday. It's 77,000. No, it's 85,000. It's 85,000. They got an offer for 78,000, and I offered them 73,000. Okay. They said the 78,000 one was a hard money lender, and can whoever that is put their mic on mute talking? Oh, here, I'll do it. Hold on real quick. Okay, so they might So even if you offer less, if you're fully cash, which you shouldn't do. Just sometimes it's fine to expend the cash, especially when you need to expend it and push it and move it somewhere. Then you can get better deals. But even a hard money lender, they're going to take about a week, 5 to 7 days to close. You don't want to go and say, hey, I'm going to get a traditional mortgage. They will not entertain your offer. Okay. There is someone, and then some, does that make sense, Diamond?
Yes, great sense. Thank you.
And then there was someone else that was chiming in. Did you have a question, or was that Cameron that was talking earlier? Okay, how difficult would you say it is for a new person to get into wholesaling? Okay, wholesaling in major cities is like a huge thing, so it's not difficult. It's already being done, so you can jump right in on that. You can probably actually even go on Facebook and put like wholesaling Atlanta, and there's like entire groups on it. But you just need to go to the county records and all that kind of stuff, and you know, even like some people just drive around. If you find a house that looks really crappy, it's likely the owners don't really care about it, and you can kind of look it up on the county website and offer them something like, hey, I saw that you got this house and it has a lot of deferred maintenance, so would you entertain an offer on it? And they might say yes, and you can just say, do you owe anything on it? And then how much do you owe? Okay, I offer you what you owe, and move the property that way. As far as buying a duplex where you live in a unit, do you have to be connected? For example, I seen a property for XYZ and they were townhouse 2-for-1 price. Okay, for a VA loan or FHA loan, they have to be classified as a duplex. When you see those properties that are townhouses and they're sold as a package deal, or a house sold as a package deal, those are called blanket loans, and they're usually a group sale. And the only way to package them up into a loan is called a portfolio or a group loan, or a blanket loan or a portfolio loan. And it's a commercial product. So you would only be able to get a commercial loan on that. Commercial loans are amortized typically for 20 or 30 years, but the term limit is usually 10, sometimes 15 years. But they're usually amortized for 20 or 30. Does that make sense? That's commercial deals. Commercial deals are anything more than 5 units or a blanket loan or actual commercial property. So does anyone have any more questions on loans, the financing piece, the debt piece, the LLCs, all those kinds of things? Those are all the things that we were covering here. We talked about the class A, B, C, the off-market versus on-market properties, wholesaling. Those are all the things we covered in part 1. Part 2, again, is going to be when we're actually doing and running a deal down.
I think I had a question. So I know when I went to go buy my first property and my husband had a condo, for instance, I know the banks were like, you needed a certain amount of money. We need to see a certain amount of, or 6 months worth of, I guess, income that you've built up and saved. When you're flipping all these houses, is it the same type of consideration? Like you're going into all these different loans, potentially they want to know that you have this much money saved for a rainy day.
So with the private money lender and the hard money lender, it depends. Some will want to see some reserves, but like I said, these loans are on the property, they don't take the lendee's and total financial situation into consideration typically. So when you go in for like a primary property, they're gonna want to see your debt. They do want to see your debt to income ratio, even with the hard money, but they don't want to. They don't look at like how much you make on the out. They don't look at how much you make on the outside of this property. They're not looking at W-2s. They don't really care about all that kind of stuff. They care about the deal. So they want to see numbers on the deal. The money on if the deal makes sense, you've got enough to cover, you know, interest. Remember again, on these loans, you're only paying interest. So you having enough money to cover 6 months mortgage isn't a thing because there's no real principal payment. It's all interest. Is off the market property only word to mouth, person to person? If not, are there any fees attached to posting or selling off market? Okay, essentially off-market properties are person to person. But like I said, there are wholesale agencies that like are very large agencies, and you can be put on the buyer's list. And also, when you are working with these wholesalers, first off, let me explain. If you go find your own deal, you are going to get a better deal. If you're going through a wholesaler, remember they're going to upcharge, so you're not getting the best deal. But if you're really looking for deals yourself, you just go ahead and pay the fee and just take the loss on it. But those wholesales, they have huge lists of off-sale deals. So if you want to get into it, you'll want to have like a list of like 10 to 20 wholesalers that you work with or more. And typically how they do it is they just send you emails, honestly. They send you emails or text you and say, hey, I got this deal for you. Yep, so a good place to go to look for those. You can go to Facebook, you can go to those meetup groups, you can go to all those kind of places. You can just look for off the market deals. So, any other questions? All right. So, if you guys want to just get summarized, essentially, you guys got to make sure you get your LLC formed. The first practical steps you want to do is get your LLC formed, find your insurance companies, find your contractor. Make sure you've got a reliable contractor. And that's those are the practical steps you need to have prepared for yourself before you get on to the second stage of actually actively looking for a property. And the reason why is you want to have your contractor lined up, because as soon as you buy the property, you want to start renovations on it, because remember, those hard money loans are only for 6 to 12 months. So you need to hurry up and get those fixed up. And and so also Devin did remind me, if you do just decide to go right into a property just for renting, and it doesn't need to be renovated, you do need to have some funds in reserves. Some will require 6 months, some will require 12 months, some require a certain percentage of rent to be allocated to it. It just depends on how the bank sets that up. So those are the takeaways, and the other takeaway is to make sure that when you first come up with your goal and then your strategy, and make sure that the strategy balances your portfolio against flips and rents and risk. Oh, and then also along with finding LLC and the insurance, make sure you guys have your funding source put together as well. Okay. Any questions before I end it? Okay, well, I'll see you guys back on Tuesday. Oh, Jeff, you've got a question? Okay, well, I'll see you guys back on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Okay, alrighty. Jeff, I'll post it to Facebook. All right, see you guys Tuesday at 7 o'clock and we'll walk through a property. Bye, guys.
Thank you, love.
No problem.